Welcome everyone to today's webinar. I'm just going to give it a minute or so and let everybody enter. The numbers are rising as we speak, so just bear with us a moment. Thank you very much. Right, it's 1 minute past, so we'll get started. So for those that don't know me, my name's Amanda Brooke. I'm the project manager for the industry engagement team over at NHS England. So we're very delighted for you joining us today for this session. The webinar is scheduled for approximately 1 hour. It may not take the full time, so you may get some time back. So a bit of housekeeping. Next slide, please. So attendees have been automatically muted to prevent any background noise. I apologise for mine. If you can hear my dog snoring, I can't help him, sorry. The chat function has been disabled, but the Q&A function is live. So throughout the session, please pop any questions you have in there. The team will try and answer throughout, but if not, I'll come back at the end and we'll put them to the team. So following the event, we get asked this a lot, both the presentation slides and the recording will be shared. Just to note though, this recording does sometimes take slightly longer due to our transcription policy, so just bear with us on that. At the end of today's session, we'll kindly ask you to complete a short form. This will help us understand a few things, whether you meet our requirements, and also if you'd be interested in a discovery in a one session with us to demonstrate your product, and also which frameworks you are currently on. I'll pop the link in the chat throughout. It's really important to us. It won't be shared with anyone outside the organisation and no one else will be able to see your responses. But it is important if you could fill that in for us. We'd appreciate it. So on that, thank you for joining us today. I'm now going to hand over to Robin, who will start the webinar. Thank you. I'll be back shortly.
Thanks, Amanda, and hi everybody. My name's Robin. I am Tiger Team Lead within Cyber Operations at NHS England. So one point I wanted to raise at the top of this call is that some of you might have spotted that we initially titled this session as External Attack Surface Management, and we're now tentatively titling it Exposure Management Service. So as you'll guess, we're kind of still testing our thinking. And this session is very much about helping us to do that. And it does mean that what we share today is indicative and subject to change. Second point I just wanted to raise, the content of this session has been produced for suppliers. And I think there was a few NHS orgs that had booked on. You might not get as much from this session, and I'd recommend joining our customer focused webinars if you're a consumer of our national cyber services, as those webinars will give you much more kind of relevant information for your kind of purpose. So our Cyber Associates Network, or the CAN, is the best place to get details about webinars as they're planned. So feel free to drop off now and take this time back if you're a service consumer rather than a supplier. So to talk a little bit into our objectives for today, today's session is about giving an early view for the NHSEs England's vision for the service and share with you the strategic context, our problem statement and the background that's brought us to our current thinking. We also want to share some potential examples for the operating model and service design. We're intended to give you visibility of the sort of system-wide strategy that sits alongside our business and customer requirements. And for us, this session is about ensuring we've considered the current market and that we test and refine our principles and requirements in line with the market's ability to deliver. So I'm going to hand over to Graham now, who will get into some of the context that's relevant to this proposed service.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're keeping well and you're up to date with your flu jab. There's my well-being session for that. So afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to provide you with a bit of backdrop and strategic context to this. So I'm the service lead for cyber operations, which effectively means I look after the portfolio of services delivered out to the NHS from a cyber perspective. So let's think about that in terms of the backdrop of where we are now. So no quizzes for the title of NHS England and in terms of cyber operations, and we formally acknowledge that, of course, that NHS England has a future state, which we won't go into on the call today. However, we still need to provide security to the system to ensure it's safe, and that's underpinned by our strategic context. So we've got our cyber strategy, we've got the activities in terms of our priorities within NHS England and wider for cyber funding activities, and making sure that ultimately we are underpinning the security of patient delivery and outcomes and the systems that are used to do so. I think that in terms of that strategic context, we've got to try and think about it in terms of there's a cyber strategy for the system. There's also business planning and strategies within our environment, and making sure that then those responsibilities can be discharged down to us to ensure that we provide enabling capabilities to the system. And of course, part of that is looking at the area we're focusing on today in terms of attack surface management, amongst a bunch of other portfolios, which we'll look at in a minute. For those of you that aren't aware, so effectively that's the NHS England backdrop in a really short, sharp nutshell. From a cyber operations perspective, sitting in NHS England, we're directed by the Secretary of State to deliver a number of national offerings. So there's a legal mandate to do so, and ultimately that mandate is to ensure that the system, so that the organisations are getting the right systems, services, capabilities, etc., to manage their risk across the system. And that's the important part. We're here as an enabler effectively, and the guys are there to ensure that they can leverage our national opportunities and services to manage that risk, with the ultimate game of protecting against our cyber threats, which continue to give us some joy and delight across the system and wider into other types of business environments, as you've seen recently over the previous few months and so on. We need to provide that protection, and we need to look at it in a proactive way, and that's the best way to do it. None of us like to address incidents when they occur, so predominantly we do that from a protection perspective. However, we do also need to look at cyber incidents when they do occur. Unfortunately, it's the reality of where we are as well, and we need to make sure that they're minimised. But the focus of today, of course, is looking at those proactive capabilities to stop that happening. Next slide, please. So I touched on this a little bit in our area. So we are working much closer with Department of Health and Social Care. We have done so for a period of time. We also work with our wider partners such as NCSE, etc., and various other different areas, because cyber effectively does not stop at our door. It stops in terms of looking at those partnerships across all those different environments. It also looks at the wider threat landscape, because cyber is not unique to healthcare, as you guys will be fully aware. And we're making sure that we focus and drill down on our areas in terms of advice, guidance, services provided centrally to those organisations. We're not a regulator, so we act as an enabler, like I say, to help those organisations deliver the things they need to do safely and securely, and making sure that they can recover from it in the event of an incident as well. And there's just a bit of a link in here for those of you who are not familiar with some of our offerings, and they're broadly split into technology offerings, assurance offerings, and training. So train the folks, make sure that we've got the technical capabilities in place where they're best deployed to address those proactive activities, and making sure that we're assuring that those things are doing what they're supposed to do. So on the screen now, you'll see some of the offerings we've got in there. So clearly we've got some offerings in this space in the likes of EMS and BitSight and so on in terms of protection around this. We are at a discovery stage at the moment, and we are looking at taking all the insights we need to do to make sure that we've got all that information ready on a discovery stage to start thinking a bit about how we plan this going forward more strategically for this offering. I don't think it's any uncommon knowledge that this type of activity does not take a significant amount of time to do so. So whilst I would like your enthusiasm today, I also want to make sure that we're setting expectations of where we are in terms of thinking about what we're doing with this activity as well. Slides are going to be shared afterwards. take a look through them. If you've got any questions, come and talk to us. Raise any questions in the chat now as well. But ultimately, this slide here is showing those set of proactive capabilities with an ops centre that's also looking at some proactive things like threat intelligence, threat monitoring, but also around that incident response in there where unfortunately things don't quite go to plan. And clearly we work with our joint cyber unit as well in terms of thinking a bit about the policies we're putting in place, the controls that then help to deliver those, and then the monitoring of them, are they effective, and our wider partners in terms of NCSE and other partners internally as well and stakeholders. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. And I'm handing over to Dan now. So Dan, over to you. Thank you, everybody.
Brilliant, thanks for that, Graham. Yeah, so my name's Daniel Oliver. I am one of the regional security leads working for NHS England, and I cover the South East. So what I'm going to talk through today is the problem that we have that we're looking to resolve with this solution, this service. So NHS England has a decentralised technology landscape, and what that means is the individual organisations are empowered and responsible for the digital systems they deploy. They get to choose what works well for them, what works within their environment, and as I said, we empower that decision making and empower them to do that, to take their own, their futures into their own hands. So what this means is it creates sort of multiple attack surfaces and potentially a disparate approach to security. Everybody gets to decide what they're going to deploy. Everyone gets to decide how they're going to deploy it. Every organisation is not equal. They have different skills, different resources. So sometimes what that results in is actually some not deploying as secure as others would potentially. And what that means is we don't necessarily see that from a central perspective, from an NHS England or DHSC perspective. We don't necessarily see that, and that's a real problem. It means sometimes we don't understand how exposed the NHS is as a system, and consequently, it really is difficult to identify and prioritise that risk remediation. If we can't see where the risk lies, how do we support that from a national level? But also, how do we empower people to make their own risk decisions? Again, if they don't see that information, don't see that data. So what we're looking to address is a unified approach to security exposure management. And as I said, that empowers local organisations to manage their own risk appropriately. And part of that is actually seeing where those risks are, supporting NHS England, DHSC to understand their response to the systemic risks, those risks that are going to impact the system as a whole. And they might not necessarily be systemic risks by nature. It might be a concentration of risks that creates a systemic output and a systemic impact. And also, this is public money we're spending, so we have to make sure that we provide best value for the money. And I think that's really, really important to this as well, is making sure that, that there is a value to what we do, and we don't, there is an output to that. And ultimately what we're looking here is a risk reduction. Next slide, please. So the consideration, the new NHS operating model that's been published is shifts the power from central to local. So what that is about that hospital to community care, analog to digital, and sickness to prevention. And that is though we've been doing some of that, there is a distinct change to that. And what that means is the technology boundary is potentially going to be spread wider. This will evolve to do that is a wider adoption of cloud-hosted solutions and cloud services, and that strategic vision includes data. We all know that AI is top dead center for a lot of things, but we're also seeing sort of genomics, wearables, and robotics. Those sort of things that people will wear, people will have in their houses, people that they won't sit within the traditional boundaries that we have today within a hospital environment and potentially a hospital building. And there are some national initiatives to this, which will be covered by Ben in a minute a little bit more. But the NCSE and government digital services offer some tools that we leverage at a local level for organisational healthcare providers, which includes vulnerability monitoring, DNS check, and early warning service. The vulnerability monitoring was historically covered by NCSE, which has now moved into GDS. And then, as Graham's described, we offer some central services from NHS England at the moment that also help with some of those risk management and risk identification activities. But the service must maximise value and maintain alignment to those points that we just raised. Next slide, please. So the challenges we have, these probably won't be a surprise, but the NHS is not one organisation. It's hundreds of legally distinct and autonomous entities, all with CEOs, all with accountabilities that they own themselves, that they manage themselves, and they deal with themselves. The scope is wide-ranging. There's a complex technology stack with multiple stakeholders and interested parties. And what we mean by that is everybody decides how they deploy their technology. And though predominantly it might be along a particular methodology, it isn't always deployed in exactly the same way, which means when we're trying to put systems in, when we're trying to share info, when we're trying to share services, actually it isn't always that easy. And the complexity of that can prove to be a blocker in some cases, and in other cases can prove to be sort of a vulnerability. Cyber risk management skills and capabilities, as I mentioned earlier, it does vary significantly across the sector. Not all organisations have cybersecurity professionals. Not all organisations have someone dedicated to this role. It's where they wear a different hat each day, and today's hat might be cyber, and tomorrow it might be something else. And not all organisations can afford to have those specific and specialised resources. So the more help we can offer them, the better, especially where we can bring up some of those capabilities where they don't have them locally. The NHS, as we all know, is subject to competing priorities. So what we really need to be sure with this is that this doesn't burden the organisations who are going to leverage and consume this. It needs to be as light touch as them as possible, because what we want them to do is take that information, use that information, and react to that information. If it is cumbersome, if it means that they've got to do a lot to onboard and things like that, well, they just won't do it. They won't find the time. They'll struggle to prioritise, and as such, we won't see this rolled out to a level where we get a full system-wide view. So it's really important, that one. And board engagement at a local level is vital, leading from the top, making sure that they understand why we're doing this. It is really important that ultimately we are here to enable healthcare to be delivered to the population. We mustn't lose sight of that cyber security is risk management of that, is enabling that to happen. And what we're doing here is we're again empowering those organisations to be able to address those risks, to deal with those risks and own them at that local level. So it's really important that top-down board level is engaged, is understood, and they understand why exactly we're doing this. I think that's the end of my slide, so I'm passing over to Ben.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dan, for that. What I'm going to do, hi everyone, I'm Ben. I'm a service manager in NHS England cyber operations space. So I tend to manage services like the current ones we've got and what could be changing going forward as well. I'm going to just quickly talk about what we've currently got in place, because Dan's done a great job of explaining the issue we've had and what we see going forward as well. And we've put some things in place. We've got some services currently that sort of touch on this exposure management space at the moment. We've learned some lessons from it, but Dan's touched on the challenges there. Those are some things we still see in place, and we probably still will see in place going forward as well. So at the moment, there are a couple of relevant services I'm just going to very quickly touch on. The first one we have is a vulnerability monitoring service. As it says there, that is essentially a scan we do on organisations' network. So in this type of service, we have organisations providing us their asset information, IP ranges and the like. We go out, scan those for you, and then provide a report to these organisations, letting them know what their infrastructure is like, any vulnerabilities that might be on it, and the like. And another service we have currently in place is a cyber security risk ratings service, where this uses publicly accessible information to provide a security rating for your organisation, essentially highlight vulnerabilities and findings for your network without needing to actually do a direct scan on it. With these previous services, one thing we have found that we're still trying to address as well as one of the challenges is ultimately we don't mandate our services, and we cannot do that. So as Dan said about getting engagement from these organisations to buy into our services, we really need to make it as easy as possible for people to get onboarded to it, to make it easily configurable for them as well. We know organisations prefer services where they feel like they have a level of control in them, and that's feedback we've gotten on both of these. If we can involve organisations in giving feedback to make changes to services or letting them tailor it to fit their needs better, they'll use the service more, and therefore they'll increase their cyber posture because they're more engaged with what we're offering out. And the end goal of this as well, it delivers more value. The more people we have using the service, then the better engagement we're going to get. Previously, we've done some market engagement down the bottom here. You can see we've talked about some different ideas on cyber risks rating the space, and we also did a VMS procurement this year, which was halted. So we've been spending some time thinking about this, and the real market engagement we're looking for here is to understand what's out there that could elevate the service offerings we have currently to make sure that we're just giving you the best service we can out to the NHS. I think that's not too much really I need to go into for the current services. I think that covers where we are right now, and what we're looking for going forward is an expansion on that and find out what you can offer, what offerings out there to bring together, because it may be the case that we have multiple offerings from different providers we could bring into one, or it may look different to that. So we're just really interested to find out a bit about what the market's looking like from yourselves, so we can get an idea to make sure we're getting the best value for money for us, essentially. I'm going to hand over to Graham now for the next slide, please.
Thanks, Ben. So I hear you say, why does the NHS need a central service? Well, clearly I'm an advocate of that because that's my role about providing centralised services. However, so there are always pros and cons of providing things nationally, providing it locally, thinking about hybrid models, etc. And many of those things are quite emotive to different areas because there's wants and needs and so on. However, from a centralised approach, there's a few aspects. So visibility, intelligence, compliance and value, and I'll just walk through what I mean by those. So the visibility part of it is that if we have greater visibility of the system and understanding about where the risks are, there's greater opportunity to do two things really. The first thing is about providing support, intervention, understanding about data in that space and understanding about where risk lies and so on. And the second part predominantly, and there's probably more to this, is it helps us to feed our strategic views. So if we've got more data-led information and we understand the pressures and the areas of challenge in the system through visibility and intelligence, it provides us a lot of activity around strategic planning, tactical planning, operational planning day to day. It also understands about that aggregated risk factor. So clearly, if we look at 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 organisations, we might look at that and say there's some exposure in those organisations and that's challenging. And once you start to magnify that out across the system, you see a different picture behind that as well. And a lot of that is only achieved through looking at that national approach around it and also interventions around that. So where we are seeing things that we're trying to help as an enabler to support and to address those risks, we can have interventions in that and support the wider system to do so. So this is definitely not about the centre imposing something on anybody. It's definitely about a collaborative approach. It's definitely about trying to get the service that fits best for everybody, whilst noting where there's opportunity to tailor it for local needs. We need to try and factor that into it. It's about having that visibility, looking at risk reduction initiatives. So there might be something that comes out of this that feeds into another service or into another emerging change program and so on, or into policy intervention and so on. So we need to look at that from that side as well. So things around visibility, intelligence, pretty much around those factors, if you like. And finally on that bit about consistent approach. Consistency is pretty much key in a lot of places because it gives you baselines. It doesn't mean a one size fits all. It just means a consistent approach in terms of how we're trying to address these areas. So in all good security management approaches and systems, you'd also want to look at your compliance against it. So why would you deploy a load of controls, get visibility, see how effective they are, and if you then didn't look at your compliance? So clearly there's ways of doing that, such as DSPT submissions, and we acknowledge, of course, that is on a point in time and so on. But there's also an opportunity to aggregate that data together and look at that and say, what's it look like operationally as well as from an assurance perspective as well. It allows us to meet our legal direction, and clearly that's not just in place for us to meet that, that's in there for a reason, to make sure that we're managing risk in the system. We're provided with funding to do so and opportunities to be able to change that risk profile in the system. And finally on this part, the value part of it. So could anybody go and procure one of these systems themselves? Yes, they could. Could they procure some support for it? Yes, you could. But if you look at it purely on an end-to-end service model, there's a lot of information that suggests that if you look at it from a support cost perspective and economies of scale and how we can look at it with all the intelligence and visibility and so on. So if we look at it more holistically, it gives you a better return on value, generally speaking, for these things. It allows us to think a bit about the overheads to meet that. It allows about thinking about taking some pressure off the system to be able to provide the enabling things for those guys to work with and look at the data on, rather than potentially spending their time on procurements and so on and so forth. So I think that's, broadly speaking, a bit of a nutshell around where we are with a centralised service. Next slide, please. So please don't hold me to account on this. This is pretty much not back of the fag packet, but it's effectively a bit of a summary level of a potential operating model. We're not 100% saying this is it. The key message in this slide, without reading all the detail, is about understanding the capabilities that we provide as an NHSE, understanding the capabilities that you can provide to us, and this market engagement as a supplier, and then onwards, obviously, from when we appoint a supplier, to deliver a service and work as one joint service provider. So from a customer perspective, you see it as a customer, as a service provider in one unit. Clearly, there's some contractual arrangements, there's some operational arrangements that make up those boxes on the right hand side of the supplier and NHS England, and they're obviously not exhaustive. But the point in here is that we are one service provider delivering a service. It needs to be a partnership. It needs to make sure that we're both focusing on customer needs and future needs. It needs to talk a bit about what data are we seeing from different angles, and it's ultimately focused around getting the right outcome in this service and protecting patient services. So the point in here is that we have to all work together on this, and we have to make sure that we use our data to do so, but we have got key responsibilities. And clearly that distills down into those onboarded organisations. And where possible, we are looking to try and think a bit about what else would append to a national service, which would allow it to provide a bit more of a localised feeling in terms of additional add-ons, or something that's maybe a whole set of folks might need. So we might not be able to provide that on a one-to-one type of basis, but there might be a greater need, but not a full national need for things in that space. So it could potentially give us some additional offerings in that stuff as well, in those areas. And it allows us to act on the information that we've got for risk management to that level as well, and looking at that from that side. Next slide, please. A really short summary slide. I don't think it goes without saying that you don't deliver this without the right partnerships in place. So clearly we have to work with a number of different service partners. We need to make sure that the service is integrated with other different activities where it's appropriate, such as CSOC, etc., and other different areas. We need to work across a changing landscape in the NHS at the moment, which you'll be aware of, and different activities for ICBs and so on and so forth, working with our governance and commercial teams and finance, and equally with our sort of technical partners, and making sure that we're doing that, and the regional leads that we've got on the call today, and their wider colleagues as well. So just an acknowledgement to the fact that obviously it's a wider partnership for this. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. I think I'm handing to you, Robin. Thank you very much.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Graham. And thank you for that sort of overview of where we are with this. So this is very much similar to what Graham was saying, sort of back of the fag packet, a bit of a potential design. And as we've already mentioned, nothing is set in stone at this point, but we've included this potential design just to help with understanding over the way that the service could work. So to kind of talk through this one briefly, this shows kind of an enterprise service on the left, which has a direct link to our national teams. So that would include Graham's team, service integration and ownership, as we've mentioned. Depending on the final solution, it's very likely to also provide a picture to various other kind of capabilities within cyber ops and wider NHS England, including like our regional security leads, so Dan and Co, and our national CSOC, to help us meet sort of national aims, increase our understanding, and help us identify any areas where we need to be doing more. The enterprise service could include local agent capabilities to capture exposure information from kit that's owned and deployed by the individual orgs. It could also have a cloud-hosted internet agent that would look to get exposure from publicly visible assets and other types of assets. As you would expect, that coverage could include sort of many different categories and types of assets. The value and sensitivity of those is very likely to be highly variable. Some of them could include things like medical IoT, operational tech, as already mentioned. There's potentially sort of cloud infrastructure, with that being a growth area, as well as your kind of more traditional sense of assets. Given the sensitivity of the exposure information, this would need to be carefully secured and only available to the right people. So at the national level, we'd need ways to use that information for decision making, risk reducing initiatives. Local orgs will need a way to see potentially and manage their own information. And ICBs will need to see the data for the orgs in their remit potentially. So this is getting a little bit more nuanced now, but we know orgs have a competitive spirit as well. They all want to be the best. So ideally, these guys might want to rank themselves and see how they're performing against others, but without placing the information of other orgs at risk. So those are all just some ideas that kind of could be interwoven into a design, just to give a bit of a picture and a bit of a visual into one idea about how we might look at doing this. And now I'm going to pass over to Dan, who's going to talk through the benefits we're looking to gain from the service.
Brilliant. Thanks, Robin. Back to me. So in regards to key benefits, this is what we've outlined at this point is we're looking to achieve from this. This is obviously subject to change if we identify other benefits and things like that. And if we achieve more, then even better. But this is kind of the fundamental core benefits we're looking to achieve. So ultimately, improve visibility of vulnerabilities. So giving those organisations a visibility of the vulnerabilities, the exposures that they might hold themselves, but also give the centre or whatever that looks like in the future, giving them visibility so that they can see where the exposures sit, how we could potentially respond from a national perspective rather than a local perspective with economies of scale and things like that. Faster remediation times, if people know about the vulnerabilities quicker, if they're alerted to new vulnerabilities appearing or vulnerabilities being published and identifying that they might hold some of those vulnerabilities, we expect that there'll be faster remediation times to that. That's the hope. That's the expectation of organisations. Is once they know about them, they can start remediating them. Relevant and timely information. Goes back to the previous one. It's about making sure the right information is going to the right people at the right time. The earlier, the better. But also pointing them, exactly where that vulnerability sits, but also potentially remediation ways, things that they can do to mitigate or fix those risks and those vulnerabilities. Supporting compliance with CAF. So the Cyber Assurance Framework, that's aligned to DSPT at the moment. What we're looking is that some of those outcomes that are outlined, and all operators of essential service in the healthcare system have to comply with those. Is what we're looking is for the outcomes, the benefits, the services here, that they align completely with CAF and help support some of those objectives for organisations. Data-led insights. So what we want to do is we want to be clever about the way we use this data. We want to use it proactively. Obviously, reactively is the expectation too. But we want to use that data to its maximum. If we empower people by giving them the data, they get to make the decisions that within their risk appetite and things like that. With all those things I've already mentioned, it will reduce the likelihood of serious cyber incidents. It is well known, the quicker you identify risks, the quicker you respond to risks, including vulnerabilities, that actually the less likely the attacker's gonna or hopefully they won't have as much time to look and target or attack organisations. So what we're expecting is by giving them the chance to respond quicker, remediate quicker, we will see less serious incidents from occurring. This is both from a local and a national perspective, is understanding the security posture and exposure. So as we get information and threat intelligence and stuff into our central CSOC, our Cybersecurity Operations Centre, we'll be able to use this service here to inform some of that decision making, inform some of the directive from there. So if our CSOC sees a particular vulnerability or alert, it can target the advice. It can say, actually, this is really significant. It's being targeted by these attackers. Actually, you need to fix this quicker, and we're going to help you do that, or we're going to monitor how quickly you do that. Increase confidence in the NHS. It speaks for itself. The less attacks we have, the less patient data gets breached, the less data gets leaked. The more confidence people are going to have that we can look after their data, and we absolutely should be looking after their data. Protect data and patient care. So again, these kind of all speak for themselves. you know, ultimately that data that people are entrusting us to look after and that we're collecting on people is really sensitive and really important to people, and we have to make sure we protect that by reducing the likelihood of attacks, by reducing the likelihood that people can access that data when they shouldn't. You know, we are again going to increase that confidence, but also protect those patients. And that's it for this slide. So passing on to my colleague, I'm not sure which one. Hopefully they'll jump up.
It's me. Thanks, Dan.
Brilliant. Thanks, Robin.
All right. So thank you. Yeah, we have a couple of slides now just on some core requirements. So I'm not necessarily going to read every line. These slides, as we've said, will be shared, and these are very kind of high level, but there's just some key aspects which we've included here. So one of them is to start is the 300 orgs that we'd be looking as a sort of minimum to cover, with their complex tech estates, which will vary in terms of kit, and some of which is going to be specific to healthcare and the sector that we operate in. It's worth saying as well that the volume of assets that those orgs might have is going to be variable depending on what it is that they're actually their core purpose is. It's like, well, we think we're going to need discovery capabilities to help us validate that we know what we have and can secure it, and that needs to be on an ongoing basis. From a notification perspective, we need to make sure that the right people get the right messages. So as Dan was just saying, in terms of the remediation work, if people need to know what needs doing, so we need to know whether exposure levels and risks are shifting, and linked to that, validating that the actions they're taking are having the effect that we'd expect. Prioritisation, so the service needs to help orgs make the right choices when they're deciding what comes first on the list of security efforts to be completed. As we've mentioned, they're going to be dealing with lots of competing priorities. And as part of that prioritisation and sort of support, we also need to give them that relevant and timely information for how they make the necessary changes and actually help to drive those risks down. Need the service to be lightweight to avoid any disruption to digital services, some of which are potentially going to be more sensitive than others in terms of probing and scanning and that kind of thing, and also provide an understanding on the accuracy and the management of any false positives that might come out of a solution. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we need to consider the ability to integrate, taking into account that other systems for integration could be varied, could include both our national and local systems, which, as we've talked about already, could be disparate and varied, bearing in mind that orgs obviously have freedom and are empowered to choose their own solutions that are the best fit for them. Availability-wise and support, obviously, both of those are pretty straightforward. We need reporting capabilities of the service that ideally need to suit a variety of audiences. So that could be people with varying degrees of technical proficiency and also sort of differing roles, different purposes in terms of that reporting and the messages that need to be shared. Orgs need to be able to measure the effect that their actions are having over time. That is really key for them to be able to see that what they're doing is having the right effect. And if it's not, why not? We can sort of dive into that. Standards wise, obviously there's a variety of industry standards around security, like Cyber Essentials, ISO 27001, SOC 2, etc. But also there's our healthcare kind of specific standards that could come in here, like the Data Security and Protection Toolkit, the DSPT. Security and compliance aspects, hopefully a really obvious area here, given the sensitivity of the data the service would hold and the data that the NHS itself holds. And finally, the service needs that kind of scalability, flexibility to make sure that we can meet peak usage demands and growth. So as mentioned, those are some really kind of high level examples, and we're going to be refining our requirements hopefully on the back of this engagement with yourselves. But hopefully, again, these help to set the scene a little bit more. I'm handing over to Lucy now, I believe, for some information on our commercials.
Thanks, Robin. Hi, everybody. My name's Lucy Lewis. I'm the Senior Commercial Advisor who's supporting cyber operations on this piece of work. And I'll be working really closely with my colleague Katie in procurement to sort of see this through to from a commercial point of view. In terms of commercial approach, I think it's really about balance for us. We would like to be in a position to say, this is our time scale, this is our, these are the deadlines, these are the milestones. But we also appreciate that we're starting quite early in terms of where we're trying to get to with this, and we're trying to be as innovative and as integrated as we can, but we want to balance that with being pragmatic about the existing contracts that we've got, that Ben mentioned at the beginning, and sort of the parameters that we're working within in terms of extending those contracts or managing them. So we are in a bit of a discovery phase. We have been doing a lot of reflecting on experiences to date. And we would really love to kind of hear from the market. We would love to meet with suppliers who think they might have a product or a suite of products that might be able to be deployed as a solution to some of these challenges that Dan and Robin have been talking about. So we will be offering one-to-one follow-ups over the next couple of months, and we're really looking to refine our requirements through that process. But also bearing in mind, we do have a sort of a deadline that we are unlikely to be able to sort of continue with the way that we are currently working beyond June 2027, and we would like to move much earlier than that. So we'd be looking to have a procurement process that has been run and wrapped up by the end of sort of next financial year. But if we're able to do it more quickly than that, then that would definitely be an advantage to us. We are very likely to be going out through CCS frameworks. At the moment, I think the one that would be in scope would be technology and associated products 2, TPAS 2. So if anybody wants any more information on the CCS frameworks that we use, how to get registered on some of those frameworks, you've got plenty of time to do that. So please do get in touch if you're not already registered, and we'll try to be as transparent as we can as our thinking develops. But we're very conscious that actually, based on the conversations that we have with suppliers, things may shift, our thinking might shift. We are looking to go out for a multi-year contract, and in terms of budget, we're working through our governance process at the moment. I think, again, based on where we land with our requirements, we may look at the budget, but at the moment we are comfortable with the budget window that we've got in terms of the intelligence that we've got. So we think that it's sufficient for what we're trying to do. But while we have got quite a well-developed view of what we need, we're not at all wedded to any particular delivery model or way that is the way that sort of plays out. So we're also open to being flexible on that as we go through, and we're happy to talk more about that at the discovery phase if people are interested in having one-to-ones with us. So in terms of our ask, Amanda, as I said, has posted the Microsoft Teams poll in the link into the chat. If you could take a couple of minutes to fill that out, that would be really great. If you are interested in meeting with us one-to-one or having a discovery session with us, you can also register your interest in that form, and we're really happy to take questions from you guys with the sort of remaining time. If there's anything that people want to talk about in a one-to-one setting, my email address is also in that form if you want to reach out afterwards. But the team are here and happy to take any questions based on the information that you've given today. So other than that would be to say thank you very much for your time, and happy to throw it open to any questions anybody might have.
Hi, thank you very much, Lucy and team. There's just one question in the chat, in the Q&A currently. Sorry if I can't pronounce this name correctly, Siddharth Venkataram. So it's team, while the focus is on the product, can service provider partner with product to showcase the service capabilities in extending the product to 300 NHS orgs? I hope that makes sense. Is there anyone who can answer that for me today?
If I'm understanding that correctly, is that question asking, would we be interested in sort of partnerships between the service element and the product element? Is that what you're asking? Sorry, I haven't got the QA open.
Sorry, it's team, while the focus is on the product, can service providers partner with product to showcase the service capabilities in extending the product to 300 NHS orgs?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm interpreting that question correctly, yeah, we'd be very happy to have sort of collaborative one-to-ones if there's a partnership that you think you might benefit from. As I say, we're really open to hearing what you think a solution could look like, whether it's a product, whether it's a suite of products, whether they're subcontracting arrangements, etc. And as long as somebody in that partnership has access to the relevant framework when we do go out to procurement, we wouldn't see that as a barrier at all.
Thank you. I've had quite a few messages that the form isn't opening. It was set to 4 o'clock at the end of the webinar. My apologies. So I've changed it now to 3:30. So if someone could just try and open the form for me. It did let the staff though. I wonder if we made that slight change earlier that it changed it to 4. So can someone just check it and post it? Let me know if the link is working now. One of our delegates on the call, that would be great. I'll carry on with the questions while someone checks me that. Are the VMS and cyber ratings being procured separately or from one provider? And that's from Mark Howarth.
Yeah, so good question. At the moment, we've got 2 separate services. We would see this solution as replacing both of those services, but also potentially sort of superseding the functionality that they provide cumulatively. And we have that is reflected in the budget that we're seeking through our governance process at the moment. So we would see those 2 services as foundational, but we're not looking to replace them like for like. Is that a fair summary, Graham?
It is. I think the focus on this is think about the requirements we're talking about today, rather than potentially thinking about today's position with the products we've got, if you like. We're working on this on an outcome-based approach. We're not working on this on the basis of what we have got now. So we believe that's the right approach, some of the approaches we've done previously on other areas, and we feel that's very effective in terms of providing a really open market scope, looking at different opportunities and inform our discovery stage as well, rather than being perhaps a little bit closed on that and very, very specific requirements rather than outcome as such. So yeah, thank you, Lucy.
Right, the link still isn't working and I'm not sure why, but we'll rectify it and I will send it out with the slides anyway. I can't see why it's not working. I'll put it in the chat again, just now I've changed the timing.
Apologies for that, folks. We'll do our best to make sure that works, and we'll send something else out, like Amanda said, afterwards. But please don't let that discourage you from feeding back to us. We're super grateful for your time today. We want to make sure this works collectively. So please definitely feed back into that.
I've put it in the chat again. I've changed the time. It's set to everyone. The staff tried it yesterday, so I don't know why it's not working all of a sudden. Anyway, we'll carry on with the questions.
I don't know if it's that we can't click on the link in the Q&A, Amanda.
Oh, really?
But we'll take it off. We'll take it offline, folks.
Yeah,
so we'll address it on here. So yeah,
I'll send it out in the. Thank you for attending with the slides. So please don't like Graham said, don't let that put you off. It's copy link. Weird. Sorry, that's my dog. So I've got some more questions. Martin Valentine, will the NHS require continuous monitoring of all third-party supplier attack surfaces under the new bill?
Robin, do you want to take that, or I'll fill on there?
I think, yeah, I was just going to say, I think in terms of the exact requirements that NHSE will be looking to kind of provide under the new bill, that's still kind of not completely defined at this moment. So I think I would go with what we've kind of set out as our core requirements at the moment is the position that we're looking to achieve, like the third party kind of supplier attack surfaces, that the remit behind that I don't think is entirely defined at this point.
It's also, just to add to that, as you will be well versed in this, being suppliers on the call, it's quite a difficult area to address at the moment, but clearly it's something that has to be addressed, because we can't address just one area of it. But like Robin said, I would focus on the core requirements for now, from where we are with the webinar.
Right, Sorry, I'm trying to rectify the link. So if I've put another link in, so if someone could try that for me. So I've got another question. India Mac Burnett, hello. Are you able to confirm which lot on the framework you would look to release on? Would that be Lucy?
Yeah, I think while we've got a short list at the moment, I don't think we would be wedded to a particular route, because based on our interactions with the market, if our requirements change significantly, we might go down a different route. I think TPAS is probably the one that's most likely in scope at the moment based on baseware, but I don't think we'd be at the point to give that level of detail. But as soon as we have it, we will share it and be as transparent as we can.
And to add to that, this sort of part of the purpose of the webinar today, for you guys also to give us insights around that, about what you think would be best from that perspective as well. So like Lucy says, we're not wedded to it. We think it's the right sort of route for it, but it's all part of our discovery and evaluation activity as well.
So I notice you've answered the one about SME, but I'll just read it out with your answer, Lucy, for those that haven't read it. Would I be right in saying that this isn't appropriate for SMEs? And Lucy's comment, we would be really happy to hold a discovery with any interested organisation and understand if there's any barriers we could remove for SMEs. So there, and I think I'm just going to scroll on down because people are commenting on others. So how do we arrange one-to-ones? That's Mark. So when the form link is working, you just complete that form with all your details. There's a little tick box. Would you be interested in providing a one-to-one demonstration of your product? And obviously you'll take yes, and then Lucy will arrange our one-to-one. There's the full details there. Like I said, I apologise for this, and we'll send the link out. I'll send it out after this to everyone who registered anyway. Oh, and Lucy's put her email in as well, but I will send it out directly after this meeting anyway. Anything else? I don't think we've got anything. No, that's everything. So everyone, thank you all for joining today, and apologies for the little glitch. You wouldn't believe we were all in IT. So we hope you found this session useful, and like I said, I will send out this link immediately after. If you've any other questions, like I said, Lucy has posted her email in there. You've also got the supplier mailbox where the joining instructions came for, and I can pass your queries on to Lucy. So thanks again, and the slides and transcription will hopefully be with you tomorrow. So just bear with me while I do that. But like I say again, apologies for the technical itch.
Just a final note for me. Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate you're all busy. We know what busy feels like in the NHS at the moment, and cyber and wider. We really appreciate you taking your time on this, and we feel like it's a really valuable session to go an hour or so everybody else's time for an afternoon to make sure we're on the same page and try to work with the ambition of getting the job right ultimately at the end of the day. And the funny part of it is there's always a live glitch in a live session, so there you can tell it's definitely not recorded this. Thank you very much, everybody.
Just to add, I've posted another link because Mike has kindly given me a little tip on trying to do it another way. So if anyone wants to try that, that's fine. But if not, I am going to send it out immediately now. Okay, everyone, thanks for bearing with us, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye.